Hey now, just wanted to do a short video, and really this is for our family and friends, and it will also help future thru hikers that are looking for preparation ideas to talk to their family and just communicate about what their plans are. When we initially talked to our family a year and a half ago, when we decided we wanted to do the AT, it just kind of was just dismissed, right? Like they're like, oh, okay, it's a year and a half away. You know, nobody's more excited about your thing than you are. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're talking to your family. But what's happened recently, with about 30 days to go, we're 4 days out, but in the last 30 days, family and friends start to ask you more questions. And they start to say, oh, you really are doing this, right? Like, because, sometimes people will say they're doing something. A lot of times never happens. Um, so then we had to actually describe what it is, and I thought this would help our family and friends answer some of those questions as you're watching. So, what is the Appalachian Trail, or the AT as it's commonly referred to? It's a system, it's a trail going from Georgia to Maine. You don't have to hike it in that. You can start in Maine and go to Georgia. You can start in West Virginia and come south, and then go back to West Virginia and go north. Like, it just means you've hiked all 2,200 miles within a calendar year if you're going to be a thru hiker. You don't have to thru hike. You can be a section hiker. You can be a weekend hiker. You can be a long section hiker, which means you're going out, 5, 6, 7 days, or you can just go out and hike it for the day. Over 3 million people will hike at some point on the Appalachian Trail this year, making it, I think, one of the safer trails as far as from animals. But anywhere you have an influx of people, you have more dangers from people. But the AT is really good about policing itself, and information travels up and down the AT very, very quick from the hikers that are on it. So if there is something weird going on, you'll typically know about it in advance. It's 2,200 miles across 14 states, and based on how many miles you plan to do per day is how long it will take, right? So if you only average 10 miles a day, it will take you 220 days. The hazard there is that if you don't start early enough, that the end point, which is Baxter State Park, Mount Katahdin, will close sometime in early October to mid-October, depending on how quick the cold season comes on and when it starts snowing up there. Why did we choose the AT? It's a great question. We chose the Appalachian Trail. My dad is a huge fan of the AT. He took me canoeing in Shenandoah. We went backpacking and camping. I was in the Boy Scouts when I was younger, until I became too cool and stopped going. He had talked about hiking it when I was in my 20s, and it wasn't on my radar. I just didn't have a desire to go out and hike, long hike it. So that faded, and then he got MS and subsequently passed away in 2016, and he's not going to be able to obviously do the AT. So we're going to take his ashes with us and put Dad in the States along the way. We're pretty excited to be able to fulfill that dream that he had, as well as keep us in shape and get us in shape. The reason we're called the 592 is that was mine and Felicia's starting weight when we chose to get off the couch. And we get comments all the time from folks saying, man, you've inspired me to start walking, or I took my first backpacking trip. I love that. That fires me up so much to hear folks getting out in the outdoors. I just never understood the draw to it, why people would go hunting and sitting in the woods, until I started going. Then I say, gosh, I know exactly why people love to do this. That leads me to some popular questions about the AT. And so the first question that I get is, are you carrying a gun? And the answer to that is no. Because it's 14 states long, it's not possible to carry. Now, you could probably carry it and get away with it, but a lot of people are like, I don't want to take the extra weight and have to worry about that in my bag. And then what happens if I get to a hotel or a hostel and somebody gets in my bag? There's just a lot of problems that can come from carrying it, more so. And there's a couple of states that don't allow you to concealed carry. I think New York is one of them. I've not researched that, but that's what I hear when I talk to other hikers, is that you can't even get permitted in a few of a couple of the states. The concern with the gun is more. Most people say, well, what are you gonna do about the bears? I could tell you, I haven't really. I know that there's problematic bears, and I know that people will counterpoint you to death with, but this happened and that happened. The reality is, there's only a bear attack 1 in like 8 million to 10 million. Like, the chance of being bit by a shark at the beach is greater than being attacked by a bear in the woods. And typically, you can do things to avoid startling bears or coming up on them. That's typically what we hear when folks have a bear encounter, is They came around a blind corner. The bear didn't know they were coming, and then boom, you're face to face with it, and it's fight or flight for the bear, and so it chooses fight. There's there are, like, in the springtime, if the cubs are out and there's a mother bear, like, I know if you get between them, like, that's a concern. But typically if you're hiking with a partner or with somebody, or even your trekking poles that make noise, bears will just, they'll be gone. They know you're coming before they're around. And I tell you, we've had 2 different bear encounters already in our shakedown hikes. The first was a bear that jumped out of a tree. It sounded like he fell 50 feet. That bear hit the ground so hard, you could hear it thud on the ground. And by the time I could locate where that noise came from, he was 50 yards up the hill running away from us. So I was like, okay, people are right. Bears really don't want anything to do with us. It kind of made me feel comfortable. Second one was a couple of bear cubs popped out of the edge of the woods at night, right about dusk. They were kind of, I guess, more teenage. They weren't small bears. They were kind of teenage bears. I yelled, "Hey, bear," at them a couple times. They took off down the hill, never came back that night into our camp. So I just feel really safe, and the bear thing doesn't get to me anymore. You just got to practice not eating in your tent and leaving crumbs all over the place, because that brings rodents, and then rodents bring predators, and then bigger predators come out. It's just a spiral if you're not clean out there. So that's another good question. What do you eat, right? And I can tell you that because you have to carry everything on your back, and you'll be out 4 to 7 days at a time. I don't know if 7 is really fewer than that, depending on how many miles you do. If you're super slow, it could stretch out at 6 or 7, but generally you're going to be able to resupply every 3, 4, 5 days. There's one place in Maine called the 100-Mile Wilderness, and for a price you can have food brought out to you in the middle of that. But most people at that point are clicking off some good miles, and they're booking it, and they're done with it in 4 or 5 days. We eat lighter foods, and so you'll see a mix of like dehydrated foods. You'll have some ramen is a big one too, like reconstituted mashed potatoes, dehydrated. Anything along those lines. Most people will bring like snack crackers, maybe a little bit of peanut butter for calories. And then of course, when you do make it to town, you load up on like a burger and fries and the good stuff, right? Knowing that you're going to be out. Hikers can burn anywhere. I mean, gosh, if you have a short day, you're going to burn like 3,000 calories. If you have a longer day, you can go to 6,000 or 7,000 calories of burn. So really taking in food consistently is actually a challenge for a lot of hikers. And so you want calorically dense foods that are lighter. So where do you sleep is another question that we get a ton. And because you do have to carry everything, you're carrying a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, a mat, a tent, all of that stuff. And typically you'll stay in that tent or a shelter about 60% of the time, from what we've seen from other hikers. We probably will fall to the short side of that. We would probably stay less and take advantage of more hostels and hotels. We've saved a large chunk of money for the 2 of us to go out on the AT. If we wanted to stay in a hostel a few nights a week, we probably could at this point, because we've saved so much money. So financially, I don't think financial reasons will be why we have to quit the trail if we do. We're banking on the other 2, because the top 3 are financial, family matters, and then a physical injury, right? That's kind of the top 3. And I say family and mental, right? People missing home, it not being the experience they want. So kind of put it in a mental bucket. The shelters on the AT are built kind of in a square with one side open and a roof over them, right? So you're typically shielded from the wind, but yeah, anything can hop up in there. We've seen squirrels and skunks and mice, just anything that wants to hop up in there and check stuff out will be able to get in. But again, if there's somebody that's awake and they're shooing stuff out, or you'll have 5, 6, 10 people in a shelter during the busy time, and then tents all over the place, you don't really have a problem. Mice are the biggest problem on there. Where do you shower is another question that we get. And the where do you shower question is a really good one, because you're sometimes 3, 4 days without a shower. If you're trying to get more miles in and you're clicking off more days between stays, some folks have gone 6 or 7 days, and you're pretty ripe with a nice layer of funk by that time. And I think there's 2 solar showers on the AT at some of the shelters. Other than that, like, you're ducking into town and grabbing a hostel. Typically hostels are $35 a night if you just need a bunk bed. If you want a private room, it can go $75 up. and some of the nicer ones I've seen at 150. But typically for us, it's just going to be a $70 to $100 charge for a hostel for the night. And if you do that once a week, it's $400 a month. That'll get you cleaned off. We'll probably do twice a week. I think hostels will be one of our largest expenses on the trail. How do you do laundry? And that's the same time you're doing the shower. A lot of people will sit in their rain pants and rain jacket and do laundry because you typically only have one change of clothes, which is another question we get. I have hiking clothes and sleeping clothes, and you got to wear those whether they're clean, dirty, wet, no matter what happens, like you're just in those clothes. I think that's one of the tougher parts for us, is having to get up in the morning and put on stinky, sweaty clothes from the night before. So we try to hang them at the shelter, the tent. We try to hang them up and dry them out, put them by a fire so that they're not cold in the morning and wet. I can put on wet, but I can't put on cold and wet. It makes it difficult for sure. How do you stay on trail? How do you navigate is another big question that I get. And these days it's pretty easy to navigate the Appalachian Trail. There's two most popular ways, but there are white blazes, and you follow those white blazes. You'll see them in all of our videos. There's typically every 20, 30, 50 yards, you'll see a blaze on a tree or a rock or something, a fence post. If you're going under a bridge, it'll be on a column. But they put these blazes up as a way to kind of visually make sure you're on trail. Now, the AT, because it's so widely traveled, it's a beaten path in the woods. The only time that you really have a problem is when there's a bunch of leaves on the ground and you can't really see that trail. But even with a bunch of leaves on there, you'll see the leaves are trampled, and you just kind of get used to seeing it. There's very few times where you will go, I don't know where I'm at, When all day long, though, you're in and out of an app called Far Out. Or if you're an older hiker and got the app years ago, it's called Gut Hooks. The Far Out app is really kind of cool. It has a satellite feature, and you don't need cell reception. So at any point you can log in, click on the GPS finder, and it'll have an arrow that points you like where you need to go to get on trail or stay on trail, depending on whether you're going north or south. It'll also show you elevations. It'll tell you, like, if you're hitting a crossroad, you'll come out of the woods to cross a country road. And here in Virginia, I'll just say Virginia 501. You'll pop off the road, and Far Out will tell you if you walk a half mile down to the right that you'll come to a convenience station that has hiker food and stuff. So you can actually go in there, get a resupply, get a bag of chips, a cold drink, and then walk the half mile back to the trail. A lot of folks will take advantage of those crossings. But staying on trail is not hard. You don't need a map and a compass. You can generally, and there's a guidebook, an AWOL guidebook. We did a video, so we'll post that up at the top too. It's really hard to get lost, and there's really just a ton of hikers on the trail. The AT is probably the easiest one as far as navigating to through hike because of the volume of people that hike between, let's say, late March and late September. The trail's full of folks on there. Especially you get to state parks. There's a ton of people in the state parks taking advantage of that trail system. You'll run into runners all the time that run the Appalachian Trail for the section that's close to their house. They'll drive to the trailhead park, run out 5 miles, then run back in. Really kind of annoying though. Those guys and girls are in such great shape. I feel like my check engine light's on and they're sprinting up a rock face. Yeah. You got to experience that one time to understand. How long do you stay on trail? And I think I addressed that earlier in the video. If you only average 10 miles a day and it's 220 miles, it'll be 220 days. We're hoping to average somewhere in the 15 to 16 mile range, which is going to be tough, right? Because if you take a 0, then you got to do 320s to average 15. And when you think about it in those terms, you're like, ooh, yeah, that's a pretty good pace. Typically on a very slow day, on a very technical terrain, we do about 1.5 miles an hour. So, you go 8 hours or you go 12 miles would take about 8 hours. Trying to do the math in my head. Math, right? Am I right? So you can say, okay, well, if you can do 12 and 8, then I'd have to do 16 to hit 24, 16 hours. But there are some stretches that just the trail opens up and there's no rocks or roots and it's a flat path, and you can click off 3.5 miles an hour. And then those times, that's where you'll make up your time. And then in the climbs, or you'll drop back down, for us anyway, to about, 1.5 miles an hour, take a couple of breaks. We sit and have lunch and all that. So hopefully that's answered a lot of the questions involving the Appalachian Trail. But if you have any others, I'd be glad to address it. Just put them down below in the comments. Thanks so much. Another question that we get asked a ton, and this is an odd one for me, are from folks that say, what can we do to support you on trail? Now, there's all kinds of stuff. People that do that are called trail angels, that do some sort of a support. Most of them are at the trailheads or give rides from the airport. Like, we have a hiker from last year that said, hey, I'd love to come and pick y'all up from the airport and drive you to the lodge. And I mean, that's $100 right there, to $120 to schedule a shuttle. And we have to go to REI and buy a fuel canister. Just the generosity of folks in the hiking community is unparalleled. And we get the same requests from friends and family. And, we don't need them to buy us anything. We've got all the gear. And so they're like, well, can I send you $50 to go get a nice dinner one night? We're like, sure. So we created a Venmo for that reason, because there are folks that want to help out. And we're not a couple that ask for help, and so it is strange, but I get it that people are wanting to come along for the journey virtually and be in support of that. So if you do want to give something, that's fantastic. We don't expect that, but we are appreciative of those who do want to do something. So again, down below in the link in the comments, not in the comments, but in the description will be the Venmo link to donate something for that. So thank you in advance for anybody who does. It's certainly not expected, but it's very appreciated.